Hi friends, welcome to WebChamp. In this video, I'm going to discuss functions in Python. Okay, so it is a part of programming languages. So far what we have seen is we used to write the Python code directly. And whenever we try to execute the file, meaning the Python program, it will execute the program line by line. But let's say you have multiple tasks that you wanted to do in a sequence. So you can create one separate function. Function is nothing but it's a identifier for the specific code. So what we will do, we will define one function, and what you wanted to do, that only that code will be written inside that function. And until and unless you call that function is not going to execute, meaning however number of times you run the code, the lines written inside a function that will not be executed until we go and call it. Okay, so this is how functions works. Even whenever you have to derive a single value by doing lots of operations and all, whatever will be there. Okay, so if you derive the single value, and you may want to use that value in your further execution somewhere as an argument parameter, so functions are going to work. Okay, so in this video I will discuss everything about the functions in case of Python. Okay, so definition is very simple. It is a named and reusable block of code that perform a specific task or set of tasks. But we should know how to define the functions, and once you define the function, how to call it. Okay, then function has concept called arguments and parameters, so we will discuss that. Even what is the default parameter concept, that we will discuss. Then what is mean by arbitrary argument and keyword argument, again very important topic. Then whenever you have to return the value, how to return the value from function to a caller, and that value can be used in further execution of program. So that's what we will discuss. And at last we will discuss Lambda functions in Python. So these topics covers the complete Python functions, right? So let's see how we can define and create. Obviously, to define the function, how Python will identify the you have defined a function. So based on this def keyword, so you have to use def keyword before starting the function, and then once you write the def, give the space and write the name of function, and that name should follow the parenthesis. Then and then only Python consider the whatever the code you are writing is in a is of type function. So this is the way. Okay, the syntax we cannot manipulate the syntax and all. The way the languages has designed, you have to write the code in that way only. Then only their execution engine will identify what you are trying to say to the program by programming. Okay, so we will here create a small function, and then we will see how it return the output. And let's write the code. Okay, let's say here I will say create and call function. This is what we are going to do now. So if I go and if I say def is a keyword in a Python, reserved keyword in Python, that is used to define the functions. In some programming languages, function keyword is there. That is fine. Okay, so here in case of Python, we have to use the def. Then you have to give the name. So I will say hello is my function name. And whenever your function name is completed, immediately after you need to add the parenthesis and then give the colon. Okay, so this is what the syntax. And on next line, whatever you write, by adding the indentation here, you can see that I have added the space. Even by default, the text editors are taking space. Okay, not Notepad and all, but yes, if you use the Sublime, if you use the Visual Studio Code, so they will take space to create the block scope. Okay, Once you are done with the function definitions, obviously what that function should do. So this function should say hello to my learners, to my audience, right? So this is what my task. So I will say print because I wanted to print the output on the console. Okay. So I will say hello learners. Okay. And we can say something different. Welcome to WebJam. Okay. So this is how I would like to print on my console. Okay. So what I will do, I will go and I will run this code. You will not see any kind of output. That's what I am trying to say sometime before. If I run this file, you can see that nothing is getting executed. Why? But I have written the code, right? Here I have written the code. I have write this line to print on the console, and obviously if I do not use this line, if I do not use this say hello and all, okay, so here you can see that this line will be executed successfully. You can see the output now. Now the question is, why this was not executed when I write like this? So whatever you write inside a function with the same block of indentation, so many lines you can write, but you need to keep the same space for each of the line, then only Python identify that this is what the part of function and all. Okay, so functions or whatever the code you will write inside a function, that will be executed when you call the function. So obviously we have created the functions, but we have not called. So until and unless you call this, it is not going to give you the output. Okay, so I will say hello, and this is what the way to call the functions. So just function name followed by its parenthesis. This is what the syntax. Now Python will identify, Python compiler will look at, come at this line, and it will jump to this, and it will start execution the code, whatever the code you have written inside this hello function. Okay. So now if I go and if I run this, you can see that hello learners, welcome to FabChamp, right? This is what I was expecting, yes. But whenever you create a function, you need to call it. You need to call it function. Okay. So for any reason, you can create the functions. But ideally, when you are dealing with the organization levels code, we do not create the functions like this. Okay. So what we do, we create a functions that accepts the parameters. Okay. So we create a functions that accepts the parameter. Let's understand what does mean by parameter now. Okay. So if you want to do something with the help of function, you need to pass the value. Let's say I have to do the addition, or you can see that even here to the print function I'm passing something, and then this print function is going to print that on my console, right, to see the output. So this is how it works. Even if you get if you see we use the len function, length function, and if you have a list, okay, here I'm not going to call that. Okay, let's say I will create a list, and if I say 1 2 3 4 5, this is what your list. And if I use the len function on this length, so I'm going to pass l here. But how this works, right? It's time to understand these concepts, how we are able to pass the l here, and how it returns the length. What is happening? So this is a function, and this is declared, meaning the code for this function is defined somewhere else. We are directly using here as a default function or built-in functions. But yes, the code is written somewhere that we are directly using. We are not looking here what code they have written for this function at all. right? So if you want to do this kind of functions, so obviously you need to create the parameter. But whenever you have to pass the L, so obviously you need a parameter, meaning, okay, so here whatever we are passing is value, right? We are passing L, and instead of L, meaning this list will go there, right? So whatever the value we assign, or whatever the value we pass to the function while calling the function, is nothing but argument, is nothing but argument. But to whatever the value we passed to the function, that value should be received by the function, meaning somewhere you need to receive that value. And how you will receive? By using the parameters. So where parameters comes in a picture, whenever you define the function, so you will use parameters are nothing but, it's not like something different, it's kind of variables. You have to define the variables for that function. So let's create the one simple parameterized function so that it will be easy for you to understand. Okay, so if I go and if I say define, and I would like to do the addition, but addition of two numbers, right? Addition of two numbers. And here, if I say print A plus B, okay. So either you can enter the numbers, let's say 10 and 20. This is what, fine. So let's say 10 plus 20. Right. So this will return you the summation, but this is static. This is not a dynamic output. This will not give a dynamic, right? So it will say 30. This is fine. Okay. This is giving, this is behaving as we want. But the problem is what? Okay, we will not be able to pass the value, because every time whenever you call this function, so it is not going to perform for your values. It is going to perform for whatever the values we have already passed, or we have written here. So what I want is, I wanted to do the sum for different numbers, but I don't want to write the function again. Obviously, it's not a good idea to write like this function, right? So what we do is, usually we create two parameters in the function parenthesis as a variable. Okay, so A and B. So whatever the variables we declare inside a function definition is called parameters. And we will use that parameters here. So obviously A and B is my variables that are going to hold the values, but values are coming from the functions when we call. So I will say 10 and 20. Okay. So now even here also you can see that it is returning, or it is not returning, actually it is printing the output as in 30. Let's say I will call this one more time with different values. I will say 20, 20, right? So here you can see the output 30, 40, right? So what we did is, we have written one simple code to sum up the data. And if I say 30, 20, okay, right? So what I'm doing here, if you look at the code, I have declared one function only once time, but I'm using that functions for many times. This is what the feature of function: write once, use many times, right? So we will be able to use this functions as many times as you want. Okay, so this is what the parameter and argument, whatever the value we passed here is nothing but arguments, and whatever the variables we created to receive the value passed to the function is nothing but parameter. So I hope this makes sense to understand what is mean by parameter, what is mean by argument. So obviously parameters are variables in a function definition that act as a placeholders. Okay, so definition, these words are a little bit like hard definitions. Okay, so for the freshers people it is difficult to understand, but it is fine. They are even simple. And arguments are the actual values that you pass to the function when you call it. Okay, so this is what my topic. What is argument and all? So now let's say there is something called default parameter. Let's say you may don't want to pass the value. Okay, let's take another example. What is mean by default parameter and all? So I have to create a function which is going to print the name of one family, for example. So if I say div, and then if I say full name is my function name, and here obviously f name is different for all the persons in the family, but l name, meaning last name, will not be different, right? If I say print f name, l name, and if you want to add something in between, you can use this. Okay, so this kind of things we can do. F name comma l name, this is going to return us the first name and last name add together. Okay, so now if I go and if I try to call this function, so obviously you need to pass the parameters, right? For the f name, if I say for the f name, let's say Brahma, okay, and last name is, let's say, Bajute. Okay, so this is how I have written a function. If I call this function, obviously it will go and it will return me the first name and last name, right? This is how we are getting the output. Here you can see the output. It's Brahma Bajute. Okay, this is fine. But let's say I would like to change this for someone like Yogesh. Okay, no, not this. Okay, I will make this function, return this function as it is, and I will recall this function for the different values. So obviously in this way, if you want to print the full name, meaning there is some variables are there that are constant, that are not, meaning value of that variables are not going to change. Obviously here lm remains same, even though if I create the another function, okay, so even that is also same. So here if you look, the value of lm is same, common between all these calls. So if you have this kind of situation, so you can make that lm as a default. So instead of passing that every time, so you can avoid that. Okay, and if you do not pass the value for last name, meaning the default, you can make that, you can assign the value to that variable while defining the function itself, and this is your default variable or default parameter. Okay, so what will happen if I don't pass the value here for the lm? It will use this default value. If I pass the value, it will use whatever the value I will pass. Okay, so now here you can see that if I run this, so even though I am not passing the value for lm, it is returning like this, right? Yogesh Bajute, Sachin Bajute, Brahma Bajute. Okay, so like this happens, meaning this is what the actually use of default parameter. So you can make any variable as a default parameter. But let's say I wanted to pass the value. You can pass. Okay, there is no issue. Whatever the value you will pass, that will be considered. Okay, so here if I use Aditya hyphen, then if I say Mani, right? Like this, if I write, and now if I run the program, here you can see that default name is used when there is no value passed for the variable called lm. But if the new value passed to the lm variable or lm parameter, it will use the latest value. So it's like reassignment of variable, and this is how it is going to work. Okay, that's what about the default parameters in function. Then we have two different types of argument. Okay, let's say whenever you don't have to, or you don't have idea how many number of values are coming while calling the function, and you may have, if you don't know how many values are coming, so that will be a problem. Okay, so let's understand the situation first. Okay, so here instead of this, I will create the one new function with A, B, C, D. Okay. So I have 4 parameters. And here if I say print A plus B plus C plus D. Okay, like this, I have to take the sum of all these numbers. Now if I go and if I pass the 1, 2, 3 only, I don't know if the parameters are less or more. Okay. I'm not sure on this. If you try to run this, it will throw error that add missing one required positional argument for the D. It says that value for this D variable is not passed. You need to pass. Let's say if I pass the value and I will add one more extra. Okay. The situation is like I have 4 parameters and I am going to pass the 5 values. How that is going to work? So you can see that again it says add text, meaning add a function takes 4 positional argument, but 5 were given. Okay, this is not valid in Python. But you have to find out the workaround. So obviously that's why there is something called arbitrary argument and keyword arguments. Okay. So we will understood the difference. Okay. So whenever you have a list of values, meaning if you are going to pass the values directly. So what you can do, you can use this star symbol and you can just define the number of variables and add last variable, meaning for last variable. Okay. Let's say here, I will write like this. Okay. So what does this mean? So this is what the symbol for arbitrary argument. Whatever the number of values you will pass, all those values will be collected in the C variable. Okay. So if I pass 3 values, I don't have any problem. Right. If I run this, okay, it says unsupported operand yes for int and tuple. Right. Okay. The problem is what? Whenever you define the any parameter as an arbitrary argument type, so that variables values, meaning what will be the type of that data, whatever the, even though it contains the single value. Okay. If you try to print the C, okay, if you try to print the C, so it will return a tuple, meaning if you pass one value, again that will, meaning the data type of that value will be tuple. Data type of C will be tuple. Why? Because we have used a single star, and this is what the use of receiving. This is what the way to receive the multiple values in a single variable. Okay. So here, no matter how many values you will pass, okay, if I pass like this, okay, so here for A and B, 1 and 2 value will be assigned. Okay, how this is going to work? So for first variable, first parameter, first value will be assigned to the first parameter, second value will be assigned to the second parameter, and then all the remaining values from third value to last value will be added or assigned to the variable called C. Why? Because we have defined that variable is arbitrary argument, I mean arbitrary parameter. Okay. And all those values it will receive in the form of tuples. So that's why you will see the output in the form of tuple. Okay. So if I run this, you can see the output as a tuple. What we are printing? We are printing the value of C here, right? We are printing the value of C here. That's why we are getting the tuple. So now you are able to receive the multiple values. Obviously here, if you have the less value, you cannot, less number of values you cannot pass, but yes, if you want to receive all values in single variable, even though the values are going to change, number of values are going to change, okay, and you may want to use this function to get the sum for all the numbers passed to this function. So you will not be, earlier we with the normal parameters, okay, a and b, what is the requirement that you are supposed to pass the arguments which is equal to the number of parameters. But let's say you don't know how many parameters are coming, you can use the arbitrary arguments like this. Even if I say c for catch, okay, or tuple. Okay. So you can see output is one tuple which contain all the values. Now if you want to do the sum, it's time to build the logic. Obviously you have a tuple in the C, so you can loop through it. But before looping, obviously you need a variable to store its value, summation value. So I will create one variable called sum, which is equal to 0 because we are taking the sum. And if the sum is, meaning if we add any 0 to the sum, it is not going to affect anything. So if I say for I in a C, why? Because C is a tuple. And then I will say sum is equal to sum, whatever the value already it has, and then 0, not 0, actually I. Okay, so some value of sum for the first iteration will be 0, and for first iteration it will add 1. So 0 plus 1 will be 1. It will get updated here. Then for next iteration, value of I will be 2. Okay, and here value of sum will be 1. That is what we have updated in earlier iteration. Okay. And here 1 plus 2 becomes 3. This is how we will get the sum of first 10 numbers by creating the functions. Okay, fine. We are not printing. Okay, see here you can see that if I say print and if I say sum, then only I will see the output it is printing. Otherwise it is not going to print, because until and unless we write the code for that specific things, it will not happen. Okay, let's say if I don't follow the indentation, what will happen? See, Python will throw error. Built-in function sum. Okay, there is function, there might be built-in function is there. Okay, right, so it is telling what is sum, but we have a variable called sum, right? That's what we want print. So obviously you need to maintain this space for all the number of lines, whatever the number of lines you will wrote in the function. Now let's say I would like to call these functions. Obviously here you don't need to pass the same number of parameters. You can pass the any number of parameters. Why? Because we are using arbitrary arguments here. 1 2 3 4 5. If I run this, it is able to return me the sum as a 15, right? So like this, any number you can pass, any number of items you can pass, and this function is going to work. And this is what they actually use. You have to use this kind of arguments when you have a flexible number of elements. Flexible number of elements meaning flexible number of items as an arguments to the function. In that case, this is going to work. Otherwise, we will use the normal A, B, C, D like this. And whatever the number of variables we create in the function's definition, so many values we use to pass ideally. But sometime this kind of things comes in a picture. So you need to deal this kind of situations whenever your number of arguments are going to change, and you have to make your function dynamic. So in that case, obviously, what you need to do is you need to use this arbitrary argument function, right? Sorry, arbitrary arguments. Okay, so this is about the arbitrary arguments. Now, what is keyword argument? Okay, so actually arguments types, I said you can define that accept the arbitrary argument and keyword argument, which make your function more flexible and versatile. Okay, that is what the actual purpose of this arguments, arbitrary argument and all. So these features are particularly useful, meaning when to use these arguments when you wanted to create a function that can accept a varying number of inputs or keyword arguments, right? So we have seen what is mean by arbitrary argument. It is also called arbitrary positional argument. Okay. So let's say there is something called keyword argument. Okay, this is what we have seen. So what is keyword argument? So we have seen we can pass the variables and we can assign the value. Okay, meaning default parameter we can create. Okay, if I go instead of this, if I say a comma b comma c. Okay, and if you want, while calling, if you want to assign the value, if you want to assign the value, you can assign the value to the any specific variable by writing like this. If I say a is equal to b, or not b, I will say 10, b is equal to 20, I will say c is equal to 30. Okay, this is how you can assign, but it's like a key and value pair. Key and value pair, the way we store the items or the way we store the values in a dictionary, Python dictionary, right? And let's say even in this scenario also, if you don't know how many key and value pairs are coming, or how many key and value pairs are passed to your function, if you don't know this, how you will deal? So obviously in that case, so this type of arguments are referred as a keyword arguments because it has a key. Okay, so in that case you can use double star and write C, because not exactly C, any letter you can write your name also. If I say Brahma, even that is also fine. Okay, but you need to use the Brahma, meaning whatever the parameter you have created here, you are supposed to use that parameter in your function. Okay, so let's say, okay, it expect intended block and all. Okay, that is fine. So once we write the code, that message will go on. Okay. So now we have inputs coming from the user and we don't know how many inputs are there and we have to deal. Okay, so what I will do, I will say print Brahma. Let's see the output. So this will kind of, meaning since the data is in key and value pair, and to handle this kind of data in Python, we use dictionary item. So here you can see that whatever the values we passed, that values are stored as an dictionary. If you see the type of this Brahma, okay, whatever the keyword argument we used, or like whatever the keyword parameter we used Brahma to receive the values in the form of key and value pair. Okay, so that will collect the value as a dict. Even you can see when I over the mouse here, here is something called a dict, str and any, meaning key will be of string type and the value of any kind of data. Okay, so now we have a dictionary. Obviously I would like to get the sum of all these numbers. So how to deal with the dictionary? Again, it's challenging, not challenging, okay, but very, very simple. So you need to apply the loop, just create the variable called sum, which is equal to 0. And if I say for I in Brahma dot values, okay, and values are going to return you the values. Okay, if I say print I, so you will be able to see all the values, whatever the number of values I will pass to this function, that will get printed out here, 10, 20, 30. Okay, and out of this, if I add D is equal to 100, E is equal to 200, F is equal to 300. Okay, like this I have passed the value. See, it is fine. Okay, and if I run this, even you can see that it is able to handle those many values. Okay, that's why, meaning to handle the varying number of values, we need to use either argument. If only values are coming, you can use arbitrary arguments. Otherwise, if the values are coming in the key and value pair, you can use this keyword argument. Okay, the way I am using here. And now the next task is I would like to update the value of some variable. So here I will say sum of sum plus I. So this will return me output as a total of whatever the number of values I passed here. See if I say sum. Okay, I'm going to print that because I would like to see the 200, 300, 600, 30, 20, 50, 60. 660 will be the output for these numbers. You can see that this is returning me 660. Right. So this is how you can use the keyword argument and arbitrary arguments in Python whenever you have to deal with the varying number of inputs from the user. It can be in any form. It can be only values. It can be a key value pair also. Both are the fine, right? So now, so far, what we are doing is we are just using this print function. But what I want is I wanted to return this value, meaning I would like to use this value, whatever the value of sum is there, I would like to use into my next program. So with the print, you will not be able to use. So if you want to do that, what meaning if you want to collect the output, meaning Python execution engine will be there. Okay, obviously, so compiler and interpreter will comes in picture. So you have to give that value to the another variable. If I try to store this value somewhere, okay, you can see that if I over the mouse here, you can see that return type is none. This function is not going to return anything. It will do the calculation for you, but it is not going to return anything. Okay, so now if I say return value from function, this is what my task. So here, instead of none, it should show the int or something like this, whatever, but it should return us. So to return the value to the caller meaning who is who is performing this execution and all to that specific. Okay, so if I say return sum, I'm going to return the sum. Okay, here you can see that it is going to return anything. Earlier it was showing none. Now it says any. Python don't know what it is going to return us. Okay, Python will say it can return anything because it's completely depend upon your code, right? So it can be a literal zero, meaning it can be a text, it can be a list, it can be a tuple, it can be a dictionary, whatever will be there, you can return. Okay, you don't need to specify like other programming languages. There, in case of Java, what type of data that function is going to return, you need to specify. But here we don't need to do that. Python will take care everything. That's why it looks, meaning Python is very, very simple language to learn. Okay. Now it is returning something. I would like to receive that value. Obviously, to receive the value and to store the value in your program, what we used to do is we used to create the variables. So I will say total as my variable, and here I'm going to save this addition. Okay, and you can use this total further to print or to perform something, to do the calculations. You can use this. Okay, so here I used print total, and now you can see that it is able to print the 660. Why? Because whatever the value returned by this function will be stored inside this. Even you can use this function as an argument to the another function. Okay, this is also even possible in case of Python. Okay. So we will see what does this mean, okay, as an argument and all. But it will be difficult to use the functions as an argument when you have a varying number of parameters. Okay, so we always try to store the output of that functions into the one of the variable, and then we will use that variables as an argument. Let's say I would like to have the one more function as a double. Okay, any number, if you pass to this number, it is going to double that number. So obviously if I say a is my function. So here, obviously, if you want to double the number, so what you are going to do is you are going to say a into 2. Okay, right, like this if you write and if I say return, because if you do not return the value, there is no meaning. So functions are always used to return the value, do some calculation, do some manipulations, get the output as we want, and then return it to the caller so that it can be useful in further execution. Okay, so if I say double, I would like to use, but here what I want is I wanted to use the output of this function in the double function. So you can use, okay, so if I say double, and here we can pass the total, and it will return. You can, meaning you can directly print the value using print function, or even you can store that value in one of the variable and then you can show. Okay, but I'm not going to store here. Instead of that, I will use this. So okay, so this is returning 1320, right? This is what we are printing, right? Meaning how this is going to work. Okay, so here we have defined function, but this function will not be called, meaning Python will directly come to this line, and when it see this line at this, we are calling the function, it will go back and it will call the function. Whatever the values we passed here, based on that value, according to the whatever the code you have written inside the function, that output will be returned and stored in this value. Okay, again there is one more function, and again Python will come directly to this line. It says meaning it will fill that. Okay, it not like fill. Okay, so it gets identified that again we are calling another function, so it will go to this line, it will accept the parameter, and whatever the code written inside that function will be executed, and then it will print the value or output here. Okay, so we are able to print the output. Let's say instead of total, if you want to pass this argument, it is meaning we are able to pass this. Okay, so we don't need to write like this also. So you can define n number of functions, and you can use any function as an argument to the another function. Let's see how this behaves. So this is also going to behave, right? So this is able to return me 1320. Let's say I would like to do this 3 times. If I run this, you can see that 1980. This is what my output. So this is how functions are going to work. Okay. So this is what all about the function with return keyword. And one more thing, when you return the value, if you write something after this return statement, that statements will be ignored by the Python. Okay, if I say print sum, it will not print anything for you. If I run this, you can see that it is just returning 1980, and that is coming from this line, this print statement. But what about this print? Even you can see that that is getting grayed out. Why? Because whatever the lines of code you will write after the print function, sorry, after the return statement, that will not be executed. Python will ignore that, because caller, meaning once you say return, it will go back and come for the next line, for the next execution. So it will not look whatever the code you have written below of the return statement. Okay, so you have to make sure that if you want to do something, write everything, whatever the code you would like to write, but return statement should be a last statement of function, should be a last statement of your function. Otherwise, whatever the code you will write after the return statement, that will not be considered. Okay, I can say like this. And now if I try to print this, here you can see that this is returning me a total, and this is what the triple, right? So now we are done, meaning how we return the value and how we can use the functions. Okay, but whenever you have to use the function as an argument, okay, ideally we do not create these kinds of functions. So instead of that, we use to create the functions. We used to create the functions that are anonymous functions, meaning no named functions. Okay, the function without name. So there is something called lambda function in Python. Okay, again, it is a powerful feature. You don't have to give the name to the function. Okay, so you need to remember first that lambda functions are always going to return the value. Okay, so let's say like this you cannot write, meaning if you want to print something with the help of lambda and all, you cannot do that. Okay, so now let me remove everything and let's see how lambda is going to work. So to create a lambda function, you need to use the word called lambda, and here you can pass meaning create the any number of variables. Okay, obviously C, D, E, F. Okay, it is fine. And here any number of parameters you can create, but you cannot write the multiple expressions because you have to write everything on single line. So you can have, meaning only one expression you can have in lambda function. So this is a very small function. If I say a plus b plus c plus d plus e plus f, okay, this is what my function, right? This is what my function. Now we have defined a lambda function, but I would like to call this function. So you cannot call. Okay, even if you over the mouse, you can see that it is not showing anything. Okay, meaning there is no return type. But yes, lambda function always return the value. Okay, this is default, and you need to assign this to any of the variable. Why we need to assign this to any of the variable? Because it is going to return the value, and once it return the value, okay, so where we will store that value? If we will not be able to store the value, then how we will use that value in further execution? You cannot do that. Okay, that's why. So this is what the syntax you need to follow. Create one variable is equal to, you can write lambda function. So here, this is what actually the function definition, but we don't have any name, so we will not be able to call this function. So how to call this function? So obviously, if you want to do the additions, if I say a, okay, and okay, add is my function name. So you need to use this variable name as a function name, like a function name. Okay, I can say, and then here you can pass the values like this. Okay, and if I go, as I said, this function is going to return the value, so we don't need to print anything here in this. You don't have to write the statement called print and all, so you can write that on next line. Okay, let me clear my screen, and then if I run this code, you can see that output is 21. So 1 to 6 sum up all the numbers is 21. Right? So by default, this function is going to return the value after doing, but you cannot write that functions with the multiple statements. It is a very small and one line unnamed function or anonymous function. But whenever you have to use the functions like map, filter, reduce, okay, so these functions, map, filter, reduce functions are there. Okay, so these functions takes another function as an argument. Okay, so there we use lambda function. So whenever you have to pass the function as an argument, okay, so let's say now earlier we have seen there was one code. What we were doing is, okay, before defining the lambda and all, okay, this is what our function definition. Here I passed this. Okay, instead of this, what we can do is we can use the lambda function shorthand. Okay, shorthand for this. So if you are going to take the many number of parameters, okay, so here what we will do, we will use the arbitrary argument. Even we can try with this also. Okay, so let me define this as a add is equal to, and let me try with lambda, and here if I say a, b, c, d, e, f, a, b, c, d, e, f, then I will say a plus b plus c plus d, right, a, b, c, d, e, f. Okay, PE plus F. So this is what my expression, function expression, instead of writing these many things. Because here, whenever you are dealing with the lambda functions, you don't need to use the return keyword and all. Okay, so I will comment out this. I don't want to use that lambda. Right. So here, if I run this, let's see how this behaves. If I run this, it is still able to behave. Right. So instead of writing these many lines of codes, you can use this lambda function very easily, right? And here we are passing the values. Even you don't need to write like this. Even you can but whenever you have to do the small operations or single line expressions, in that case we used to create the lambda functions, and then we will use that function as an argument. Even instead of doing this, okay, instead of using this function and all, you can pass lambda here directly. You can pass lambda here directly, but obviously we need to pass the values here. Okay, so let's skip this as it is. So you can write this many lines of code. So it's anonymous function. By default, it is going to return the value. Okay, this is what the features of lambda function. And mostly whenever you have to pass one function as an argument to the another function, so we used to create the lambda functions and pass, because it has no name. Even it can have multiple arguments, but only single expression. Okay, so this is what the use case. Whenever you have to do the additions, okay, addition of two numbers, even you can do that the way we are doing addition here for n number of things. So here, if you want to do the additions, so I will say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. This is one of the powerful feature, okay, we can say. And even we don't need to write return statement and all. Everything is like automatically work. Okay, so this is what the total for all these 6 numbers. Now let's try to receive all the variables as a tuple. Okay, so here if I remove, so this is going to return as a tuple. Okay, now we have a tuple. Now let's use the shorthand. Okay, again the case is how we will do. So it is going to return not A, but it will say I. I'm just trying to use the shortcut I for, I don't think so this will work. I for I in E. Okay, but this is going to return the values one by one. So it says statement must be separated by new line or semicolon. Okay, so we cannot do like this. Okay, but we can use the functions directly. Functions are there, so we can create another functions to get the sum and all, and then we can call the function here also. Okay, so let's see, but there is no meaning to create that function. Okay, so let's skip this as much as simple. So create the variables, any number of parameters. Okay, but here we cannot use arbitrary argument and all. So here we can write the expressions directly like this, and this is going to behave for us. If you want to do use the arbitrary argument and keyword argument, so lambda function is not good. So you can create the normal function with definition. Even whenever you have to write the code in the multiple lines, and it is not possible to derive the output in single line expression, then it is not good idea to go for the lambda function. So just go for the normal functions the way we create. Okay, so even when your functions are a small or for a specific purpose and you don't want to define the full-fledged function, using define. In that case, only lambda is useful. Otherwise, lambda is not useful whenever you have to create build, meaning you will not be able to build the logic in single expression. So obviously the way I was trying adding considering the arbitrary arguments here, but we will not be able to do that because of some limitations. So in single line expression, that is not possible to get the sum of all tuple elements, and that is what the limitation of lambda function. So you cannot write multi-line expressions here. Okay. Then obviously when to use this, so functions as an argument to another function, you can use lambda function. Sorting with custom key functions, filtering elements. So these kinds of things you can do with the help of lambda functions. So what does mean by filtering the element? Okay, let's say it is coming for like this for 30, 50, 60, 80, 100. And out of this tuple, I may like to receive, okay. I may like to consider only, or I would like to return the values which are higher than 50. So here, even we can write that, but again, we need to loop through it. Okay, so we can use the filter functions and all together on the tuple, not on the tuple. Let's see how we can filter the data. So let's see if we have these many elements, or we may have a list with these many elements. Okay, and you may want to do the filtering. So I will say L is equal to, okay, not with the arguments and all. So if I have a data like this, again, I may want to do the filtering for even numbers or based on the any other conditions. So you can do that. If I say I would like to get, okay, all are even numbers. Okay, so let's filter the data in by using lambda expression in another kind of filter function. Okay, so we can use lambda as a argument to the filter. Okay, so let's do that. So if I say new list is equal to filtered list, or we can say that. So I'm going to pass this as in the list constructor. So this is not going to return anything, but this will create the list. So if I say filter, okay, so if I use the filter, so here you are supposed to pass the function. You can see that it's accepting argument, so in the form of function. So I will use the lambda here. I will say x, and then if x is greater than or is equal to 50. Okay, this is what my function definition. Okay, it is meaning whatever I'm doing here is little bit hard to understand for the first time. So you can get the hands on these kinds of functions first, and then you can come to this shorthand. So obviously filter is another function. You need to understand this, and if you understand, I'm just showing you how lambda we can use as an argument to the another function. Okay, then I will say L. Okay, and I suppose to okay, this is what the definition actually filter function. So this should come inside a filter function, right? Because it accepts two parameters. Okay, if you go and if you see the definition, it accepts first is function, and it is going to return anything, but again you need to pass it as a iterable. Okay, so what we will do, we will run this and try to print new list. So how this works, let's see. And you can see that it is able to filter the data 50, 60, 80 and 100, which is meaning it is able to filter the list for the numbers which are higher than 50 or is equal to 50, right? So this is how the lambda function used. This is very much helpful. Okay, not only this, but if you want to do any kind of operation on any of the iterable and return the new, you can use this. Here I will say 2. Okay, any kind of operation you can do. So it is going to square each of these number. Okay. Okay, so here we used filter. Okay, then we need to use the another function. Even if I say okay, I will add a few number like 99, 89. So these are the odd numbers. So if I wanted to get the numbers which is equal to 0, meaning if you want to get the numbers which are even only, not the odd one, even this kind of filtering you can do with the help of lambda. You can see that all even numbers are coming. Okay, if you say not is equal to 0, so this will return only odd number. So it's completely up to you, but if you are able to make the logic in a single line expression, then and then only lambda is helpful. So this is all about the functions in Python. Okay, so I hope you like the content of this video. Please share this video with your friends, those who are looking to learn the Python at the easiest possible way. So you can share. And thank you so much for watching the video. Have a nice day. Please do not forget to subscribe the web chat.